When I was in labor, I stopped my husband from leaving for my sister-in-law's wedding. He slapped me hard, saying, "You're just pregnant, not dying." He drained my savings account and abandoned me. But upon his return a week later, a shocking surprise awaited him. One he never saw coming. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how I learned the hard way that love, loyalty, and family are not always what they seem. For years, I believed I had the perfect life. I was 30 years old, working as a marketing manager in Chicago, USA. I had a stable career, financial independence, and a future I thought was secure. I was married to Jason, a 35-year-old real estate agent, a man I once thought was my rock, my partner, my love. For the first few years of our marriage, things seemed normal, maybe even happy. Jason was charming and attentive, and I truly believed we were building a life together. But there was always one thing that I struggled with: his family. Jason was incredibly close to his mother, Margaret, and his younger sister, Olivia, who was 28 and worked as an event planner. At first, I admired their bond. They had been through a lot together after Jason's father passed away, and I respected that. But what I failed to see at the time was how much their influence controlled his every decision, and how little space they left for me in his life. At first, Margaret seemed warm and welcoming. She would invite me over for dinner, ask about my job, and make me feel like part of the family. Olivia, too, was polite if a little distant. I was relieved, thinking I had found a second family. But over time, the warmth faded, replaced by subtle jabs and manipulative games. Margaret constantly criticized me in disguised insults. "Oh, a marketing manager? That must be exhausting, pretending to be creative all day," she'd say with a smirk. Or, "You're always so busy with work. No wonder you don't have time to make Jason's favorite meals." I'd laugh it off, but deep down it stung. Olivia followed in her mother's footsteps, whispering behind my back, giving me disapproving looks. The two of them had a tight grip on Jason, and every time I tried to bring it up, he'd brush it off. "You're overreacting, Emma," he'd say. "They love you. You just need to relax." So I tried. I told myself I was just being sensitive. After all, no family is perfect, right? A couple of years into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. I was overjoyed. I thought maybe this would be a fresh start for Jason and me, a reason for him to finally put our family first instead of his mother and sister. But I was wrong. Pregnancy was far from the magical experience I had imagined. From the beginning, I suffered from severe nausea, dizziness, and extreme fatigue. As the months went by, I developed a rare complication that began affecting my eyesight. I struggled to do basic tasks, and the emotional weight of it all was overwhelming. I needed support, but Jason was nowhere to be found. Instead of stepping up, he spent more and more time at Margaret's house. If I asked him to help with chores or run errands, he'd sigh in frustration and say, "Emma, I work all day. Can't you just rest?" It's not that hard, but it was hard. I felt alone, trapped in a marriage where my needs didn't matter. Even when I broke down crying, telling him how much I was struggling, he just rolled his eyes and walked away. One night, when I was 7 months pregnant, Jason came home later than usual, laughing on the phone with Olivia. When he finally got off the call, I asked where he had been. "Olivia's planning her wedding," he said casually, tossing his jacket onto the couch. "I was helping her with the guest list." I blinked, confused. "Her wedding?" "Yeah," he said, stretching. "She and her fiancé are getting married in New York in a few months. Big venue, fancy dinner, the whole thing. It's going to be amazing." I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. "Jason, I'll be 8 months pregnant when they get married. I don't think I can travel." "You don't have to," he interrupted. "Mom and I will handle everything. Olivia wants a grand wedding, and we're going to make sure she gets it." His words hit me like a slap. I was his wife, carrying his child, and he was more invested in his sister's wedding than in the fact that I was barely able to get through the day. "But Jason," I tried again, my voice trembling, "I need you here." "I can barely." "You'll be fine, Emma," he snapped. "Stop making everything about you." That night, I lay awake in bed, feeling the baby kick inside me. tears running down my face. It was the first time I truly felt abandoned. As Olivia's wedding approached, Jason became completely consumed with the preparations. Every spare moment was spent at Margaret's house, and every dollar seemed to go toward funding Olivia's extravagant wedding. Then, the night before their flight to New York, I made a horrifying discovery. I logged into our joint bank account to pay some hospital bills, and my heart stopped. The balance was nearly empty. Panic surged through me. I checked the transaction history and saw the withdrawals, thousands of dollars gone. Money I had saved for the baby, the hospital bills, the future. Jason had drained it all. I turned to him, furious. "Jason, where is our money?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "I used it for Olivia's wedding." My hands shook with rage. "You spent our savings on your sister's wedding while I can barely afford my medical bills?" Jason finally looked at me, his expression cold and irritated. "Emma, stop overreacting. Olivia's wedding is important. You'll figure it out." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Figure it out?" I stepped closer, voice shaking. "You're leaving me alone, 8 months pregnant, broke, and struggling." Then it happened. Jason raised his hand and slapped me. The force sent me stumbling back, my hand flying to my burning cheek. I gasped, eyes wide with shock. "You always make everything about you," he snarled. "This is your mess, Emma. You deal with it. We're getting late." Margaret and Olivia stood by the door, completely unbothered. Olivia smirked. Margaret simply sighed in irritation. Then, without another word, the three of them walked out of the house, left for the airport, and flew to New York to celebrate Olivia's wedding. And just like that, I was alone. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my cheek burning from the slap, my heart hammering in my chest. The front door had slammed shut, and the house was eerily silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My hands shook as I clutched my belly, feeling the tiny kicks of my unborn children. Yes, children. I hadn't told Jason yet. I was carrying twins. But what did it matter now? He had made it painfully clear that I was on my own. I stumbled to the couch, feeling lightheaded, my vision blurring. I had no money, no support, and I was heavily pregnant. My breathing became erratic, panic setting in. How had my life come to this? A few years ago, I was a confident woman with a promising career. Now, I was just a burden in my own marriage, discarded the moment I needed help the most. I tried calling Jason, not because I expected an apology, but because I was desperate. Straight to voicemail. I tried Margaret, no answer. Olivia? She blocked me. I let out a hollow laugh. They had cut me off completely. They had drained our savings, abandoned me, and were now in New York, celebrating Olivia's wedding with my money. I sat in silence, staring at the bank account balance, hoping it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Jason had withdrawn everything, leaving me with just a few dollars. My hospital bills were unpaid, my rent was due, and I still had to figure out how to survive the last month of my pregnancy alone. The stress must have been too much because suddenly a sharp pain tore through my stomach. I gasped, doubling over, gripping the couch as another wave of pain hit me. No, not now. I tried to steady my breathing, convincing myself it was just stress cramps. But when I felt the warm trickle of fluid down my leg, I knew my water had broken. My mind screamed in panic. It was too early. The babies weren't due for another 5 weeks. I grabbed my phone and with shaking hands, dialed the only person who might help. Rachel. Emma? Her voice was groggy. I had woken her up. What's wrong? I could barely get the words out. I think I'm in labor. There was a brief silence, then a rustling sound as she jumped out of bed. I'm coming. Stay where you are. Breathe, Emma. Just breathe. By the time Rachel arrived, I was on the floor, clutching my stomach, crying in pain. She didn't waste a second, helping me to my feet and rushing me to the car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain, fear, and exhaustion. At the hospital, Dr. Bennett, a kind but firm obstetrician, took one look at me and knew there was no time to wait. We need to do an emergency C-section, he said. The babies are coming now. I nodded weakly, barely able to process his words. The last thing I remembered before passing out was Rachel holding my hand, whispering, "You're not alone, Emma. You're going to be okay." When I woke up hours later, the room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the monitors. My entire body felt heavy, but the pain was gone. I turned my head slowly, heart racing, searching for my babies. Then I saw them. 2 tiny bundles, wrapped in soft blankets, lying peacefully in the bassinets beside me. A boy and a girl. Tears blurred my vision as I reached out, my fingers trembling. "They're perfect," Rachel whispered from the chair beside me. Strong and healthy, a sob escaped my lips. I had done it. I had brought my babies into the world, even when everything was stacked against me. But as I looked at their tiny faces, reality hit me hard. I couldn't stay with Jason. He had left me to give birth alone. He had drained my money, humiliated me, and abandoned me when I needed him the most.
There was no coming back from this.
I wasn't just making decisions for myself anymore. I had 2 innocent lives depending on me now. Rachel seemed to read my thoughts. "You know what you need to do," she said softly.
I nodded, my jaw tightening.
"I'm leaving him." The moment I was discharged from the hospital, I filed for divorce. I didn't hesitate, didn't let the fear hold me back. I had nothing left to lose. When Jason finally returned from New York, he was met with divorce papers. He barely looked surprised. If anything, he scoffed. "You're being dramatic," he said, tossing the papers on the table. "Dramatic?" I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "You left me alone. You drained our savings. I had to give birth without you." Jason rolled his eyes. "You handled it, didn't you?" I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. There was no remorse, no guilt. He truly did not care. That's when I knew I had made the right decision. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, I uncovered something that made my blood run cold. Jason hadn't just been neglecting me. He had been cheating on me. For months, he had been having an affair with Victoria, a wealthy businesswoman he had met at a real estate event. And the worst part? She had been funding his extravagant lifestyle. While I was struggling, he was out whining and dining another woman. But karma had a way of working faster than I ever could have imagined. Because just a few months later, Jason's world came crashing down. When I found out about Jason's affair with Victoria, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, empty realization that I had wasted years of my life on a man who had never truly cared about me. By then, I was too exhausted to be heartbroken. The divorce was already in motion, and I was focused on one thing: building a future for my twins. Jason, on the other hand, acted like he was untouchable. He barely fought the divorce, dismissing it like it was an annoying task he had to deal with. He was so confident in his new relationship with Victoria that he didn't even seem to care that I was leaving. One day, during one of our last conversations, he smirked and said, "You're going to regret this, Emma. I'm about to be rich, and you'll still be struggling in that little dump of yours." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a man who had built his entire identity on lies and illusions. I didn't respond. He wasn't worth my words anymore. After the divorce was finalized, I focused on surviving. It wasn't easy. Between work, childcare, and adjusting to life as a single mother, there were days when I felt like I was barely holding on. My eyesight was still weak from the pregnancy complications, but I managed. I refused to let Jason's betrayal break me. Meanwhile, Jason and Victoria were living the high life. Pictures of them at expensive restaurants, exotic vacations, and luxury parties filled my social media feed. Margaret and Olivia, once so proud and condescending, clung to Jason and his new wealthy mistress like desperate parasites. I ignored them, focusing on what mattered: my children. Then one day, I got a message from Rachel. "Emma, you're not going to believe this. Check the news." Confused, I opened my phone and searched for Victoria's name. And there it was, front page news. Victoria was a fraud. She had been running a massive financial scam, laundering money through fake investments and conning people out of millions. She had duped dozens of investors, including Jason. My breath caught in my throat as I read the details. She had disappeared overnight, draining Jason's accounts before vanishing without a trace.
His house, his cars, all gone.
The lavish lifestyle he had mocked me over had crumbled into nothing. Margaret lost her home. Olivia's marriage fell apart when her in-laws found out about the scandal. Jason was left with nothing but debt and humiliation. I sat there, staring at the article, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: satisfaction. This was karma. This was justice. Days later, my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw Margaret's name. I let it ring, my pulse steady. When it rang again, I sighed and answered. Emma, Margaret's voice was trembling. We need your help. I almost laughed. Helps? Jason is nothing, she said quickly, her voice laced with desperation. Victoria stole everything. He's lost his home. We have nowhere to go. I remained silent, letting her squirm. The children need their father, she continued. You can't just abandon us. We're family, Emma. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Family. The word felt foreign coming from her mouth. I thought of the night they abandoned me, the slap, the stolen money, the way they laughed and celebrated while I lay in a hospital bed, giving birth alone. I thought of how Jason mocked me, ignored me, discarded me like I was nothing. And now they were begging. I smiled to myself, a slow, deliberate smile. You weren't concerned about family when you left me pregnant and broke, I said calmly. You didn't care when Jason stole my savings. You didn't care when I had to give birth alone. Emma, please, Margaret whimpered. We made mistakes. You made your choices. I cut her off. Now live with them. And then I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt free. After I hung up on Margaret, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. It didn't ring again. No desperate messages, no follow-up calls. They knew. They finally knew that I wasn't their fool anymore. I wasn't the quiet, obedient wife they could push around, drain dry, and discard when it suited them. That Emma was gone. For the first time in years, I felt light. Like I had finally shed the weight of their cruelty, their selfishness, their endless manipulation. I looked around my small but peaceful home, where my twins slept soundly in their cribs, safe, loved, and untouched by the poison of their father's family. This was what mattered. Not Jason's downfall. Not Margaret's regret. Not Olivia's ruined life. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about Jason. Not because I cared, but because the irony was too perfect. He had left me to struggle alone, convinced he had won, convinced his life with Victoria was an upgrade. And now? Now he had nothing. Rachel came over that night, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine. You're glowing, she teased as she set the food down. I laughed, shaking my head. I just feel lighter.
Free? She grinned.
So, are you even the least bit tempted to check up on them? You know, see how deep in the gutter Jason's fallen. I sighed, leaning back.
No.
I already know everything I need to know. He got exactly what he deserved. Rachel smirked, pulling out her phone. Well, in case you change your mind, you might want to see this. She slid the phone across the table, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and saw a picture of Jason, unshaven, slumped on a park bench, looking utterly defeated. The headline above it made me snort. Yex real estate agent Jason Wright, once known for his elite clientele, now broke after falling for millionaire scammer. I skimmed the article. Jason had lost everything. His home had been repossessed, his car taken, and his accounts wiped clean. Margaret and Olivia were facing eviction, and Jason had been blacklisted from the real estate industry. Nobody wanted to work with a man who had been caught up in a scandal. He was a joke, a cautionary tale, a failure. I put the phone down, shaking my head. It's poetic, really? Rachel raised an eyebrow. How so? He left me because he thought he could do better, I said simply. Turns out, he was just a stepping stone for someone else's game. Just like he used me, Victoria used him. Rachel leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. And if he came crawling back? If he begged you to take him back? I let out a slow laugh. Not in a million years. And just like that, I moved on. It wasn't easy. There were still nights when I lay awake, remembering how alone and afraid I had felt when I went into labor, how humiliated I had been when Jason walked out, how broken I had felt when I saw the empty bank account. But those memories didn't cripple me anymore. They were reminders of what I had survived, of what I would never allow to happen again. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I rebuilt everything from scratch. I found a better job, moved to a more comfortable home, and made sure my kids would never grow up feeling unloved or unwanted. I was their protector, their mother, their everything.
And Jason?
Jason was just a name for my past. A warning. A lesson in betrayal, greed, and karma. The last time I ever heard from him was nearly a year after Margaret's desperate phone call. An unknown number popped up on my screen. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. Hellos. There was silence. Then a familiar voice. Jason. But he didn't sound like the arrogant man I had once known. He sounded hollow. Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know where else to go. I have nothing. No home. No money. No family. I closed my eyes, taking in the weight of those words. He had lost everything. And yet, I felt nothing for him. No sympathy. No anger. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. I'm sorry, he murmured. For everything. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. I don't think you even know what that means, Jason. A pause. Can we talk? Just for a minute. I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. Jason, you're a stranger to me now. I don't owe you anything. And with that, I hung up. No second chances. No mercy. Just peace.